Tampa Bay Lightning are one of the hottest teams in the NHL right now, winners of their last four. We talk about their win in Vegas, as well as the Point and Kucherov show, wrapping things up with a question that we all want to ask. All that coming up and more on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Danker. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Locked On Lightning. And just a reminder that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. On this episode, we're breaking down the win over the weekend over the Vegas Golden Knights. They gave the Lightning their fourth straight win. We're talking about not only with all the shows going on the Vegas Strip, we talk about the show that was the Point and Kucherov show out there in Vegas. We talk about that and how well those two have been playing as of late, as well as wrapping things up with, now with this big win streak, the Lightning are an arm's length of the Toronto Maple Leafs. We talk about the reality, the possibility of the Lightning getting within earshot of those guys in the standings. Before we grab all those topics and talk about them, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube, so go ahead, subscribe to the channel there, hit that notification button so as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified, and drop a comment below and hit that thumbs up button so it will help the channel grow and reach more listeners. So we're talking about that game over the weekend, and boy, it was a great game. It was a highly anticipated game. It was a game that I think out of that 3-game stretch that I talked about so much on here on the show, the game against Panthers, the game against the Rangers, and of course this game in Vegas, I think this was the game that I was most excited for, believe it or not, because that's the defending Stanley Cup champions there. And anytime you get a chance to play against those guys and not only win against them, but also sweep the season series, that's something that you should be very, very, very happy about and excited about. And the Lightning should be, because the Lightning have really done a phenomenal job against the Vegas Golden Knights this season. So in that game, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I'm going to anyway. I absolutely nailed that prediction. And it was one of those games where I think we're starting to see the recipe. I think we're starting to see the winning formula in action. I think we're starting to see a side of the Tampa Bay Lightning that we haven't seen at all this year. And that is a team that fully is aware of what they need to do to go out and win hockey games. Now, it's not always going to be a plan that's going to be carried out to the T, but it's going to be a plan to where this team knows what they need to do to get the job done. This was a game in which we've talking about at length, where the Lightning needed to go out and they needed to get everybody involved on this team, and they did. You saw Point, you saw Kuch, basically being the conductor of this offense. Anthony Cirelli got involved on a shorthanded goal, which was a phenomenal effort. He absolutely just, the speed on Cirelli, sometimes we forget how fast this guy is. Anthony Duclair, 3 goals in 4 games. What else can you say about how well Julian Brisebois nailed that trade for Duclair out of San Jose? You saw Vasilevsky kind of just doing really what we expect out of him at this point. And really, that is to just make the saves here and there, keep your team in the game, and even when they're winning, keep the game in a situation to where you're not going to get overwhelmed. And that's what Vasilevsky did. Obviously, the only glaring points from this game is that once again, we saw the Lightning really not do much after the second and third periods in terms of shots on goal. Now, obviously, we can't really complain about that, considering in those periods they scored four goals, four of their I'm sorry, they're three of their 5 goals. I'm sorry, and yeah, it's hard to complain about shots on goal when you're scoring goals and you're winning games, but it's one of those things where we could either sit here, complain about it, and say, well, listen, this is going to catch up to them, which it could very well catch up to them. But at the same time, I'm looking at the bright side of this. It's helping not only us as spectators of this team to kind of look at Andre Vasilevsky in this defense more closely, but to also allow Andre Vasilevsky to really get in the mindset again of being comfortable with carrying this team. And that's not a bad thing. In games past, in the past few months of this season, and even in years past, especially when Vasilevsky hasn't played well, we've kind of diverted from that way of thinking of allowing the big cat to carry us. But this year, especially now when this team is playing as well, it doesn't seem as much of a daunting task for Andre Vasilevsky. Because really, like I said, and I think this is going to be the formula for this Tampa Bay Lightning, and that is just going out there, letting the offense free flow, taking care of the chances and opportunities that are afforded to you throughout the game, as we saw in this one, and really doing as much as you can to alleviate the burden that is in front of your goaltender. And I thought for the most part, the Tampa Bay Lightning succeeded in doing that. They took enough of the tension away from certain opportunities and areas to where Vasilevsky didn't really need to make that highlight saving play. And that was really something that has stuck out to me, especially over the last couple of games for Andre Vasilevsky and this Tampa Bay Lightning team. Obviously, the big storylines from this game is Point scoring twice, Kucherov having 4 points, this team obviously winning 4 straight. A lot of great things happening for this team right now. And really, when you look at this Tampa Bay Lightning team, I could confidently say all around, and it not only just stops with Point and Kucherov, but I look all around and I say this is the best this team has played all year. And I think that as long as they stay on this level, which if I haven't said it enough already or at all, if they could stay on this level, which is really not a lot to ask for because this isn't really, it's not like they're going out there and playing above their pay grade. No, this is kind of what we've expected from this team all season long. It only really took 2 guys at the deadline to really flip that switch for them. But this is something that we could very well see for the rest of the season and into the playoffs now, whether or not that leads into a higher place in the standings or even in a deep run in the playoffs. That remains to be seen. We can't really say that because, there's a lot of hockey to be played. And we'll talk more about that later on in the show today because that really goes hand in hand with the whole Toronto Maple Leafs conversation that we will be having later on the show. So let me know your comments. I mean, there was a lot from this game that we could have talked about, but those were really the things that I really wanted to highlight, especially just the way this team came together. And it never seemed like, even when they weren't getting a lot of shots on net, it never really seemed like this team was ever in danger of being overwhelmed. And I think that is something that we could all agree on. So let me know in the comments below how you felt. What were your takeaways from this game? Let me know, how'd you feel about Vasilevsky in net? Like I said, I thought this was, he's on one of the best streaks that we have seen him all season long. And I expect that to keep up as the season concludes. So we'll keep an eye on him. And coming up in just a little bit, we'll talk about the Point and Kucherov show, because those guys have been absolutely electric in the month of March, as well as the NHL season, but especially in the month of March. We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit. But first, I want to talk about our first sponsors of the day, and that is our friends over at eBay Motors. Now, passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Roll the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So as always, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are streaming in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel there. Hit that notification button, so as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified. You'll be able to listen to it. You'll be able to watch it, and hit that thumbs up. So it really helps the podcast grow and reach a lot of new listeners and fans and all of that. So we just got done talking about how well this team played as a whole, and that can't be understated, really, with this team. This is really this 4-game streak. And, you know, some of you might say, well, that's recency bias. I mean, the way this team plays, of course, you're going to say A through Z about them in terms of positive things. But really, the thing that has really stuck out to me with this team is they're playing together in a way that we haven't quite seen clicked in quite some time. I don't want to jump the gun too much, but when I was watching that game the other day, earlier today, and when I was talking about it, and I just remembered what I said earlier in the podcast. Obviously, these two games did not play over the weekend. These two teams played last night, so I was thinking of the Panthers game. But anyway, I was getting certain vibes from this team before we jump into Cooch and Point, and I just want to make one last point with this, is that I was getting certain vibes from the Vegas game the other night, and it really kind of reminded me of 2020, 2021, or even 1920, because the Lightning, especially probably 1920, because the Lightning obviously weren't really yet the top dogs. There was still a lot of baggage that they were carrying around, quite like this team, who, you know, as well as they've played thus far in the season, they still have quite a lot of baggage, because until they continue to do certain things and you know, make the playoffs and that, I think, you know, some of the critics will still be hot on their tail because, well, they still can't do this, they still can't do that. But I was getting very, you know, bubble Lightning vibes, because it feels like we're still seeing them, which is a good thing even now. They're conquering their ghost. They're exercising their ghost in live time. And that's what you really want to see. And that's where hockey and watching the Tampa Bay Lightning gets really, really exciting, especially if you're new to watching the Tampa Bay Lightning. If you're a new fan, watching what this team has evolved into over the last 4 games, and well, really pretty much since the deadline, this team is in a very good place, a very special place. A place that we haven't seen them been in quite some time. But really, that performance, we can't talk about that without talking about the table setters with this Tampa Bay Lightning. And that it all starts with Nikita Kucherov and Brayden Point. Those two guys have just been really phenomenal all season long. They've been really even more extraordinary during the month of March. Really, if we want to break down the numbers, since March 2nd, Brayden Point, and mind you, both guys have played 6 games, Brayden Point has scored 7 goals and has 11 points overall. his shot percentage is 46.7, which if you don't know if that's good, that's incredible. And you look at Nikita Kucherov, who, mind you, is in a very much neck and neck battle with Nathan MacKinnon for points and where they are placed as well in goals. MacKinnon has one more goal than Kucherov's 41, where Kucherov has a point up on MacKinnon. Kucherov has 3 goals and 14 points. And those guys, I equate them to, this might be a cliche, but I'm a New York Giants fan, so I look at the glory days of Giants football where they had great running backs. And, usually we always kind of call those running backs Thunder and Lightning. And that's how you could really equate it to Brayden Point, Nikita Kucherov, Thunder and Lightning. Nikita Kucherov's the Thunder. He could do pretty much anything. He could score, but obviously he loves to dish it around. He's really the table setter. And Brayden Point's the Lightning. He's able to strike fast. He's able to strike dangerously. He's really been phenomenal over these pretty much this last month and really the whole season. But when these two guys are clicking, I can't see, especially what we saw this whole month of March. There's really very few combinations offensively in the NHL that are that much better. Maybe Draisaitl and McDavid, if you want to talk about those two guys being good. With Colorado, when Landeskog is playing when Landeskog is playing at all, him and McKinnon are probably in that category too. I mean, we could go with Nylander and Matthews as well in Toronto. I mean, there's a lot of combinations offensively around the NHL, but I mean, there's very few that I feel this season have been clicking as often together and as well together as Brayden Point and Nikita Kucherov. And that's going to be very important for this Lightning team down the stretch, because if either of those guys, and I hate to say this, if either of those guys start to slip up or start to regress, the Lightning are going to have a tough time. And I know that might seem a little contradictory given the fact that, they have a lot of good pieces around them right now. Guys that are playing very well. Steven Stamkos looks like he's in the middle of a resurgence. Anthony Duclair can pretty much score from anywhere on the ice right now. Brandon Hagel has been a very good piece to this team, a very good supporting scorer. But it really starts with those two. And that's really something that we're going to have to heavily rely on, unfortunately, for those two to score. Not necessarily goals. I mean, I don't think you're going to see a lot of goals out of Kucherov down the stretch. I think he's a smart enough player at this point in his career, and he's very well aware of when things are going well, what is the actual reasoning for that. And I think that's something that is not really talked about with him, is that he is a very smart player. He has a very high hockey IQ. And, some players might just try to, especially when they're in the middle of these award races, they might just to try push the envelope. But with Coach, it's kind of just more so he's very well aware of what works around him. And he's gonna continue to go back to that over and over again, whether it be with Stamkos, as we've seen in years past, or now this year, whether it's been with Duclair, with Point, with Hagel at certain times. He's gonna go back to those guys, and really, like I've said, but many times in this, and I know some people might be getting a little bit tired of me saying it, but it couldn't be farther from the truth. It couldn't be closer to the truth that when those two guys play well, whether they're putting up points or scoring goals, it really has this incredible trickle-down effect that I haven't really seen from many teams around the NHL in quite that way, to where it really loosens up the team. We've seen it over this 4-game stretch about how when those guys are playing well. I mean, I just listed off their stats. You see how well everybody's playing. We've seen multi-goal games out of Stamkos. Hagel's been getting in on the mix. Radish scored a goal. Hedman's been scoring as well. It seems on nights that both these guys get involved, the rest of the team does too. And that's why we're having 5-goal nights for the Tampa Bay Lightning, where really on those nights, even though we're probably not going to have those for much longer, it really makes Andre Vasilevsky's life significantly easier because everyone's just playing so loose. They're not thinking, they're just reacting. And that's probably the best brand of hockey you could ask for out of this Tampa Bay Lightning team. So all we have to do, or all we can do, is pray that these guys stay hot for at least the rest of the NHL season, which includes in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So, and if that happens, I mean, all bets are off and anything can happen with this Tampa Bay Lightning team. So let me know, what are your takeaways from Point and Kucherov over this past month? Really, I mean, it's only been a couple of weeks, really, but how much longer can this last? Are there other people on this team, other players on this team that are due for breakouts? I mean, I didn't even talk about Nick Paul, who has been really playing well, and Anthony Cirelli, who's also been playing well also. But we'll keep an eye on those guys as well as we get ever closer to the end of the NHL season. So coming up in just a little bit, the Lightning are super hot right now, and they're not that far away from the Toronto Maple Leafs. We'll talk about that. And Maple Leafs are playing tonight. So what does that mean for the Tampa Bay Lightning? We talk about that as well. And can they catch up to those Maple Leafs before the end of the NHL season? So before we go into that, I just want to talk about our last sponsor of today's show, and that is our friends over at Game Time. Now, listen, you shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat. And their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They have phenomenal last-minute flash deals, zone deals. You could find your tickets and buy them for every kind of event. Super easy. My favorite feature, views from your seat. Gone are the days from sitting behind a giant pole or their ever dreaded obstructed view. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts, it's the place to find last minute tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So as always, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen. If you haven't already done so, there's still time in the episode. Go ahead, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Subscribe to us if you prefer to listen to us on audio platform. But if you're on our YouTube page, hit that thumbs up button, drop a comment below this video. What has been your most exciting thing from this 4-game winning streak? Because, I mean, there's so much to pick from. Has it been just seeing Vasilevsky kind of just figure it out in real time? And I'm not saying he's going to get back to his Vezina Trophy looking days, but if he becomes, like I said, a third of what we got out of him back in the old days, I think that's more than enough, especially if this team continues to play well and then the playoffs roll around. We might get Sergachev and everything falls into place. But you still got games left to play. You still got a lot of things that need to fall in your favor, obviously, to have long-term success. One of those that I think that we've kind of been hinting at, or at least been talking about quite a bit in the last couple of months, has been, especially when the Lightning have gone through their ups and downs, and their ups have been very, very up. And that has been getting closer to the Toronto Maple Leafs in the standings. Right now, the Lightning are at 80 points with 14 games left to play. the Toronto Maple Leafs have 80. Well, they're going to have 87 because they won tonight. They actually beat the Capitals 7-3. They have 60. I think tonight was game 68 for them. So the Lightning and the Toronto Maple Leafs are pretty much have the same number of games played. And 7 points might seem like a very daunting hill to climb, especially with only probably a little over a month, little under a month actually, for this team to play regular season games before we jump into the playoffs. But it's one of those things we still have to entertain it, because I think that, like I've said, with this team, the way they're playing, I mean, all bets are off, especially with the schedule that they have coming up. They're playing LA, they're playing San Jose. They got some tough matchups going back home, but those are matchups that I think at this level of play, as long as you keep the consistency up, I think it's very well within the realm of possibility that the Lightning could catch Toronto, especially with what Toronto's got coming up on their schedule this upcoming weekend. They got a back-to-back home and away. They're home against the Oilers, and then they're on the road against Carolina, and then they're back home for 2 against the Devils, Capitals, and then finishing up the month of March with Buffalo. Now, those are games where, you could easily lose one of two. I think we could say with confidence that the Carolina game is going to be tough for Toronto. And that's going to be a game that I'm most definitely going to be watching this weekend. Those games against Washington and New Jersey, I don't know. I never want to say that those are gimme games. I never want to say that those are guaranteed win games. But like I always say for the Lightning, when they play lower tier teams or teams that we feel that are inferior to them, I always feel like with these are games, if you're a Leafs fan, these are games that you should win before you go on the road up to Buffalo, which is a game that you could very well lose, because we know how tough Buffalo is. We know how well Buffalo plays against better teams. And then you're back home against the Panthers, and then the Lightning come into town. The Lightning also have the back-to-back. That game, that's a back-to-back. That's the game one of their back-to-back. The other is in Montreal. But I will say, and maybe I'm being a little biased, the schedule for, and maybe obviously the schedule makers probably had in mind that a lot of these teams were going to be a lot better than where they are now. But the Leafs have a pretty easy schedule on paper going forward compared to what the Lightning have in store for them to end the season. But that really what goes back to what everything I've been saying is that the Lightning are masters of their own destiny. Really, they can't, as much as it's fun and addicting, especially this late in the season, to be a scoreboard watcher, it's just one of those things where really you just need to go out there and win the games that you are expected to win, which, the Lightning, I'm not saying that the Lightning are expected to win every single game from now until the end of the year. I mean, they're going to drop a game here or there. I mean, if they don't, that's going to be a whole nother insane storyline. But there is a very real possibility that I'm looking at their schedule right now. They could very well should beat San Jose, LA, and Anaheim before they go back home, play Boston. Now, that's a toss-up game. Boston's kind of a little bit of lagging right now. Boston, I've watched a couple of their games recently. They're just, even though they're 7-2-1 in their last 10, they're still a team that, I don't know, I feel like they're starting to run out of steam, especially now with Florida catching up to them. But outside of the Boston game, after that, you got the Islanders, and then outside of the Toronto game and the two Maple Leaf games, really the Lightning should win all those games. So this is going to be a race. As much as I want to say and will continue to say that the Lightning can, it could very well come down to the last game of the season. And that's really the fun stretch that we have ahead of us to end the season, going into the Stanley Cup playoffs. It looks like, obviously right now, unless something catastrophic happens, unless Boston and Florida don't win for the rest of the year, which is not going to happen, these two teams will not meet in the playoffs, at least in the first round. And you could very well expect that these two teams, though, will be going at each other like they will be meeting each other in their two matchups, the regular season. And I fully expect the Lightning to bring the same kind of energy and the same kind of performance that we've seen out of them over their last four wins, and especially all their wins that they've had in the month of March. So let me know in the comments below how you're feeling about that. What are the chances of that? What were you, like I said, also type in your takeaways from the game against Vegas, and also how we feeling about Point and Kuch. Are they really the table setters, or is now this team's kind of a little bit more deep now that you have Duclair and you could kind of spread the wealth around with other players playing well? And we'll be back tomorrow, talk more about Lightning hockey, and you could find it all here on Locked On Lightning. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.